Good afternoon. I'm Diane Coffey. I am a member of the board of the Municipal Art Society, and I'm also a partner at Peter J. Solomon Company, which is an investment bank here in New York, a private investment banking firm. Just as an aside, I want to say two things. We're fortunate in New York to have a great mayor who himself is an entrepreneur, so understands the need for creating more opportunities for people like, well, let's call them junior Mike Bloombergs, to be innovators and creators and to come here to develop their companies. In fact, we at our firm actually have our own entrepreneur in residence, a young man who has created and sold 2 tech companies himself. So we hope to learn something from him. Anyway, it's my pleasure today to introduce our panel. First, I'll start with our moderator, who is Daniel Massey. And Daniel's a reporter for Crain's. And by the way, I also want to say thank you very much to Crain's for acting as a sponsor for this wonderful summit. Crain's is in the forefront of bringing controversial and new issues to the fore for discussion among New Yorkers who care about the future of our city. So it's wonderful that they're sponsoring today. Daniel has been a reporter at Crain's since 2008, where he's covered the economy, labor, immigration, housing, all real soft subjects, right? and economic development. His reporting earned him selection to the 2011 City Hall News Rising Stars 40 Under 40 list, and prior to Crain's, he worked at the Newark Star Ledger, where he wrote a 6-part series on a soldier who was nearly killed in a roadside bombing in Baghdad. In 2003, he produced a film, which was the official selection at Sundance, Rotterdam, Locarno, and Human Rights Film Festivals, a film entitled Persons of Interest on Muslims detained after 9/11. He's lived in the Eastern Cape of South Africa for 2 years and has written a book under protest on the role of Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela's alma mater played the role it played in the country's liberation movement. Now, I can tell you, if you're looking for a job, this is where you need to come, to these 2 people I'm going to introduce you to now. Because both of them have very accomplished careers, and I'm sure are in and of themselves and their work can be immensely useful and advising younger people too. Lynn Brown is the Senior Vice President for University Relations and Public Affairs at NYU. For the last 5 years, she's also led 2 major initiatives, NYU 2031 and NYU in NYC, the university's first comprehensive strategy for growth, and the NYU Sustainability Task Force, which is a university-wide group charged with reducing the university's environmental footprint. Before coming to NYU, Lynn worked on Capitol Hill for Congressman John Bradamus, who incidentally I also knew on Capitol Hill, and Congressman Tom Foley. A native New Yorker, Lynn serves on the board of civic boards, including the Union Square Partnership, where she is co-chair, the Village Alliance Business BID, and the New York Building Congress. Aaron Shapiro, he is our entrepreneur of the hour. Adam is CEO of Huge, H-U-G-E, one of the fastest growing market agencies in the United States and the largest employer in Dumbo. At Huge, Aaron helps some of the world's leading companies reimagine how they interact with their customers and manage their business in the digital economy, which, folks, is where it's at today. All of us have to learn how to do that, if we haven't already. I haven't already, but I'm on the path. Since joining the company in 2005, Aaron has grown the agency from a small web design studio into an agency of more than 400 people operating out of the United States, Europe, and Latin America. Prior to Huge, Aaron spent more than a decade as a technology entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and management consultant. He also served as the founder, CEO of Silver Pop Systems, a leading email marketing company. He is the author of Users Not Customers: Who Really Determines the Success of Your Business. And now you're going to hear directly from these experts. So welcome them, please.
Thank you. Thank you for those introductions. We're here at an important time, and the State Comptroller, Thomas DiNapoli, actually did a good job of setting the stage for us earlier this week when he announced that the city would lose another 10,000 jobs on Wall Street before the end of this year. And going to what Seth was talking about earlier, puts more emphasis on the need to diversify the city's economy. And so we couldn't have a better group here today. We have somebody from education, which is responsible for more than a third of the city's private sector job growth in this recovery, and tech, which the tech sector in the city is actually at a higher level of employment than it was at the height of the boom. And so I'd like to start off, we heard a little bit about the city's efforts to diversify its economy. Yet the unemployment rate is still hovering around 9%. The city's job growth rate has slowed down and is now slower than the nation's. We just heard that the poverty rate in the city is 20%. Can the city really help to create jobs, or is that something that is more a role of the national economy?
Sure. So from my perspective, I feel like I live in two different worlds. I read the paper every day, and it's all doom and gloom with all the really distressing statistics that are happening that we're all really concerned about. Then I go to work every day, and our company, to give a microcosm of what's happening in the tech space, we have about 50 open job hires. We can't hire enough people. And while we doubled in size this year as a company, we actually could have grown another 25% had we been able to find enough talent. So there's this tremendous impetus, and while my company is somewhat unique, it's really indicative of the entire technology industry, that we're in this tremendous era of transformation where there's a tremendous amount of job growth happening. And the main issue for us is really how to manage that growth as opposed to the other continuum.
Yeah, and Google actually mentioned to me that they have 2,000 engineers here in the city, but they could have much more than that if there was enough talent.
Absolutely.
And can you talk a little bit about NYU's role in helping to create that talent?
Ellen, sure. I think one of the reasons that higher education is doing so well in New York is, first of all, and give credit to the city because of the vibrancy of New York. We're finding our applications off the chart. So is Columbia, so are other institutions in the city, because young people want to be in New York. And one of the reasons is because they think being in a presence in an urban environment will jumpstart their careers. This is not unrelated to the fact that they are here getting internships and starting to work already. So I think we're bringing the students here. The question and the onus on universities is, are we training them and giving them the skills they need to be able to match with the jobs that are out there? I think we are. We find that we're doing pretty well in terms of our students finding jobs or going on to graduate or professional school right after graduation. A little bit like what Aaron's saying, that around us there's troubling signs. If you look at our two sectors, they're prospering. And so how do we actually look at what we're doing that works and say, can that be replicated, and can the city or other people look at some of that to take examples from?
Is there more the city should be doing or could be doing, or are there specific things the city has done that have directly led to you both creating jobs?
So I would say really probably the number one thing the city can do more is really what other initiatives can they do for talent generation. So NYU is doing a fantastic job with things like the ITP to develop a lot of talent. But from the scheme of the labor shortage that exists, it's really a drop in the bucket. And the problem is not just training new people. The problem is also how do you transition mid-level to senior level executives who might have very promising career in, say, publishing or media or finance, and they wake up one day and now the whole world is digital. So how do you migrate those people to be successful in a digital career is a whole separate set of challenge. So really whatever the city can do to initiate those kind of types of training programs, I think is one of the biggest wins that the city can do to help alleviate these issues.
Sure. For universities in the city, I think a big issue is space. We need space. Columbia just finished the approvals and are launching on their expansion. NYU, as you heard, is looking at a 25-year plan for how we can grow physically. Our per capita square foot is always lean and mean. It will be that way. It's that way for all New Yorkers. But we need a certain amount to be able to stay on a trajectory. And I would say one of the needs that the city can be helpful in is helping us free up available space and be able to develop it. For NYU, we project that need over the course of a generation as much as 6 million square feet. And that's a lot of square footage, and where you place it and how you place it sensitively will be important. For us, it's not only Greenwich Village, but we'll be looking at Brooklyn and the First Avenue Health Corridor as well. So I think that's an issue that where the city can help. The city's helped us, if you take a longer perspective than even Seth gave, even back a little bit further, where the city has helped immensely for institutions of higher education is in making the city safe. Our biggest factor during the 1980s and 90s is the students wanted to come, but the parents didn't always want them to come. We attract at NYU over 70% of our students from outside New York. And so to the degree in which people feel that this is the largest safe city, that has helped us immensely in keeping our applications up. And our students then want to stay. 65% of NYU students stay in New York after they graduate. So we feel we're a magnet, and then they stay here to be hired by Aaron.
And Huge has grown from 9 people in 2005 to over 400 today. I mean, how do you do that in such a short span? You've been sold for tens of millions of dollars. Take us through what it is about New York, if anything, that's helped you grow it so fast.
Sure. So the secret is really not that complicated from my perspective, which is if you work really hard and do good work, you tend to get more customers and grow from there. So a lot of what we've been about is really making sure that we do the best digital work in the business, and we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of companies want to hire us for that reason. Probably the biggest thing that New York City has done that's unique is New York City has an incredible brand reputation. So I actually lived, before Huge, I lived in Atlanta for 5 years, which is a great city and I loved it a lot. But my pet peeve for Atlanta was every week I was going on an airplane, flying somewhere else to meet with another potential client and company. And I'm still amazed when I'm in New York today that I can bop around Midtime and speak to 5-10 global companies that are all very close. And it's really hard to, it's easy when you live in New York to take for granted how powerful it is to build a business, but that network effect of being so close is probably the most powerful driver of our success being in New York City. The other big thing to New York is that companies around the world look to New York organizations and assume that if you're in New York, you're the best in the industry. Mm-hmm. So when we were often a small company, they would say, I want to hire the best in the business. They would assume that because we're based in New York, that we have that stamp of success, which was invaluable to helping our organizational grow in the early days.
You talk much too fast to have stayed in Atlanta anyway. That would never have worked, I can tell you.
So I learned when I was in Atlanta to say y'all a lot, which is a very helpful word.
The fast, y'all.
To speak very slowly. Then as soon as I'm practicing my Atlanta speak now, and as soon as I moved back to New York, I learned to speed up. Now I no longer talk like this.
But the talent magnet effect of New York, I think, works not just for business, but for higher education too. We find, for instance, in recruiting faculty, and at core, every institution of higher education has the recruitment of faculty as its propulsive force. It's getting in that faculty. And what we've found is that people, we can attract them, and they want to come to be with other smart people. It's a version of what Aaron's saying. Smart people like to be with smart people, and then they like to be close to smart people, and they like to be able to bump into them and work with them across the hall or across the lab. In fact, that understanding that phenomenon has actually shifted, has got us to shift how we hire faculty. We now actually approach faculty whom we want, wherever they might be, and we say, who do you want to work with in economics, or if it's in physics, or it's in neuroscience? And we get the list of people they want to work with, and we try to recruit them in what's called cluster hiring. You hire in a group of people who have already told you they want to work together. And that can be a very successful way, and you're bringing in then 2, 3, 4, 5 faculty at a time. And they've already told you they can work and they want to be with these people. And
yeah, it's really interesting.
People.
So so just to elaborate on your point, the magnet for New York for talent is a similar thing we're experiencing. I would say about half the people we hire today are people who are from smaller markets who we convince to come to the big city and live in New York, be at the center of the digital media revolution, and then they're lured to move to New York City and join Huge.
And one of the things I want to talk to you about with regards to the education front, and we see this a lot with what's going on downtown now with the Occupy Wall Street movement. The top 1% taking 44% of the income in New York. We're seeing a widening income gap that's continued to widen over 30 years. I mean, what role can universities play in helping to bridge that gap?
Well, I mean, the premise on which a lot of the access to higher education is built on is that higher ed can be one of the great leveling fields, that most institutions are what's called need blind. In other words, we accept students regardless of their income and regardless of their ability to pay. And then you scramble to put together financial aid packages that let them do that. And that's a combination of federal and state resources. It's difficult. It's getting more difficult. NYU can, at our tuition level, which is with room and board and tuition over $50,000 a year. So it's a tremendous struggle, and it's one of the things that keeps us all up at night. But I do think one of the great leveling factors that can help that income inequality is keeping that support to let anybody who has the talent to go to whatever institution they can do well in. But I don't say that it's something I look at over the horizon and say, oh, that's okay, and I'm optimistic that we can keep that up. It's a real struggle for all institutions.
And if we can sort of bring it back to Seth's conversation earlier, he called it an Erie Canal moment for the city. The mayor has said that he's challenged the city and said that the city could become Silicon Valley within the next period of time. And I'd like to bring the discussion now to this tech campus that has been proposed. NYU is planning to put in an application. Mm-hmm. I know that you have been following this as well. Can and should New York aim to be Silicon Valley? A, is it a realistic goal, and B, should it even be a goal that we aspire to?
Sure. So first, I think the whole tech campus is a phenomenal idea. I think it's a tremendous asset to the city of New York that'll do an amazing amount for building technology and innovation and economic development in our city. The main challenge New York has competing against Silicon Valley is that the scale of Silicon Valley is really hard to appreciate how big it is compared to New York. It's a giant entrenched thing. It's been around for 50 years. To be candid, I don't think it's totally realistic to say we're going to be the next Silicon Valley, but quite frankly, it doesn't matter. If we can grow technology substantially to a large level, so it's just as big an economic contributor as finance or any of these other sectors, that's a giant win for our city, and I think that's a very achievable goal.
Yeah. I agree, and I think looking at what Seth was talking about from the inside of higher ed, let me give you an analysis as well. New York City and its institutions of higher education does very well in physical sciences and life sciences. Some of the best talent nationwide or worldwide is here. But basic science, that kind of science tends to be done in a basic science research mode, which is often very intense and solitary. It can yield great discoveries, it can yield cures, and can be very beneficial to society. But what engineering does bring to the mix is much more that ability to take research and want to apply it, and apply it to real-world problems and come up with real-world solutions. And the underweighting in engineering that the EDC and the mayor and others saw, you could see it within higher education. Because the bringing together of science and engineering is a very potent match, a very potent mashup to get the best of both. And it becomes a virtuous circle because even the applied work you do can actually set the agenda for the next set of basic research questions. So that's part of what led NYU back in 2008 to decide to merge with Polytechnic in Brooklyn, because we did not have an engineering school, and having that applied and engineering basis is going to be very important. And I think with the city's challenge to all of us to say, now what's the next step for you, it's gotten NYU, Columbia, CUNY, as well as you've heard about the institutions coming from outside New York, to really say how can we accelerate that process. And I agree with Aaron, it doesn't have to replicate Silicon Valley, it just has to be its own new dimension to an economy and a capacity you can bring to the city.
And as someone who's covered economic development battles across the city, it's the first economic development project of this scale I've seen that has not really elicited any controversy. It's,
Now, don't jinx it for them.
but it's, you got people on Roosevelt Island who love to shout and protest, and they're embracing this. You have people, in Brooklyn embracing this, and I think...
Well, it's tremendously exciting. What's also interesting is that the nature of technology that's done in New York and what New York can be great at is very different than the types of technology done in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And a lot of it is because New York has the ability to be at the intersection of technology and finance, technology and media, technology and fashion, and law, and all the other industries, which is very, very hard for Silicon Valley to do. Silicon Valley is great at pure tech plays, but they kind of live in this little bubble where they're not as connected to mainstream corporate America as organizations are in New York City. And I think leveraging that connection is a big advantage the city of New York uniquely has.
We'll take questions from the audience in just a couple of minutes, so if anybody has questions, they'll have some microphones set up in the aisles. So they're coming down the aisle. Okay, so we have this proposal, and it's been framed largely in the media as this big battle between Cornell and Stanford, and some other very seemingly viable proposals have emerged in the last couple of weeks, and one of which is a proposal that NYU has. Do you want to just quickly take us through what you're proposing?
Sure, and I think, as a general premise, the point is Stanford and Cornell, bring it on. And I think it's the more that the city will only benefit if we're the home of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 great institutions of higher education. I don't see how New York City loses out, and quite honestly, I don't see how any institution currently in New York loses out. NYU's proposal is going to be to actually focus on the science of cities, what we think is a whole emerging sector for products and industry. The premise is, let's not make London our competitor, let's make London our customer. Use New York City as a laboratory to test some of these ideas, and then hopefully commercialize them and send them out, and jobs, and create jobs, because that's what the city would like to see. Our proposal calls for doing this in Brooklyn. Brooklyn's where we already are with our Polytechnic. We think Brooklyn is the most exciting civic laboratory around among the boroughs. It's where a lot of the young, creative people are. And I think, our proposal makes sense for us. We think it makes sense for Brooklyn. But again, it's to say I think you're going to see, whether it's Columbia or CUNY, you're going to see a great explosion you already have, of interest and ideas. The other thing NYU is going to try to bring is a consortium of both other universities. So again, bring it on. The more we're partnering up with Carnegie Mellon and University of Toronto, Warwick, and also industrial partners. So it's been a great incentive. Thank you, Seth. We've been very busy since December, but it's kept us off the streets and focused on what you want and what you're looking for. But I think the exercise itself has been very helpful. And as you say, we were saying that back in the green room. It's very hard in New York to think of things that don't occasion some grumbling on the side, and this seems to have won with a great energizing moment.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Hi, my name is Amin Tigani, and first of all, thank you for this fantastic talk. It was really enjoyable. I'm a graduate student studying urban planning at Hunter College, and it was really exciting to hear you guys talk about how New York is sort of this nexus where industries can talk to each other, but one of the missing components that I thought would be interesting, and I wrote this down so I can try to be succinct, is innovations that create opportunities to develop employment that is not in the field of law or finance, but sort of skilled labor, vocational labor, taking those ideas and creating opportunities in printing or fabrication. I mean, the stage that you're on and the piece behind you was created by a growing field in the city. So what things is higher education doing, and what things are the creative sector doing to work to create jobs on the other end so that things are being produced in the city and creating opportunities for people who cannot seek a professional degree or have some college?
You want to take that
So being a digital agency, we unfortunately make very few physical things. But what I will say is that a surprisingly large number of our employees have no college degree. We had an employee who made a very significant amount of money and had a ninth grade education. One of the foremost senior executives in the company never went to college, just finished high school. And really because technology is the ultimate meritocracy. If you're a good programmer, if you're a good designer, you'll get a job independent of everything else. And a lot of the jobs in the technical world are not necessarily very high skill sets if you look at things like graphic production and HTML. So I think there is an opportunity to extend the pool of people who can be employed in the knowledge sector who don't necessarily have a formal education.
Lynn, did you want to add anything to that?
No, and I don't want to be non-responsive to your question, but I think the premise, and I think we have to be careful about this even when we talk about universities as job creation engines, because I think they are, but that's not our mission. Our mission is really not narrowly defined job training or job creation. I think an impressive number of jobs often flow, but that's often inadvertent, because what we really are idea creators. Our main mission is creating and disseminating knowledge and teaching and learning. And it does introduce often in the economic development model a concern and a caution that we don't distort the mission of a university to be what it is not. You do want to, in the course of idea creation, and I think this is something that the city is asking us, it certainly is valid to look at the market value of ideas and how can you optimize those, whether it's licensing or patents or actually looking for the next new sector or commercialization. But I have always been very resistant of putting universities in a mission critical position of job creation. That is really not what our raison d'etre is. So it's a balancing line you have to walk as well.
Okay. Great. We're actually out of time already, believe it or not. And thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Yeah.